Okay, I did my presentation on a New York Times article named Buddhists Go to Battle When Nationalism Overrides Pacifism. And I start my presentation by posing a question. Is violent force ever necessary within a culture that promotes nonviolence? And I use some information from the text here. The Buddhist teaching on ethics are fairly straightforward within the five precepts. The five precepts state you can't participate in violence, stealing, lewd acts, lying, or intoxicants. My next slides, I start to kind of do a summary of the article and the various points. According to some Buddhist nationalists in Sri Lanka and Myanmar, the solution is not that simple. Buddhists are experiencing what they claim to be an existential threat connected to the growing presence and associated actions of the extreme Islamic fringe in their homelands. The article definitely points out this growing Islamic presence. Muslim populations that practice a faith in accordance to Islam are on the rise. There's a quote I pulled from the article that says, by 2050, Pew projects that there will be nearly as many Muslims in the world as there are Christians. They also highlight in this article how there are Islamic bombings taking place. Islamic extremists are regularly bombing Buddhist places of worship. There's a Buddhist gentleman by the name of Thero who says the aim of Muslims is to take over our land and everything we value. Think of what used to be Buddhist lands: Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kashmir, Indonesia. They have all been destroyed by Islam. Um, and the article, basically, what the article is all about is it highlights how Buddhists retaliate with force. Buddhist sects that subscribe to the purest Theravada strain of faith have taken particular offense to the Islam presence. Buddhist mobs have sought to attack the surrounding Muslim minority population in an effort to reclaim their lands. Um, from here, again, I go back to the text and I kind of give a description of what Theravada is. Theravada in Sanskrit means way of the elders, and Theravada views itself as representing the original and authentic teaching of Buddha. Um, from there, on the next slide, I go back and I acknowledge this Thero gentleman again when the article quotes and says, incited by a politically powerful network of charismatic monks, Buddhists have entered the era of militant tribalism, casting themselves as spiritual warriors who must defend their faith against an outside force. Now, this is kind of an important point in the article because, and as I go on in this next slide to discuss, um, tribalism is everywhere right now, but the fact that the Buddhists are participating in it is it should be alarming because the Buddhists, if anyone, are typically the ones that are most collected as when it comes to violence. So again, this next slide is I kind of conclude with the summary of the article and I start participating in some independent thought on the subject. And I start by saying tribalism is an epidemic. The acts associated with tribalism are impacting all major institutions, and the fringe extremists seem to currently have the loudest voices while simultaneously causing the most harm. Furthermore, we live in a world where our leaders refuse to denounce violence. Um, from that slide, I point out some examples in our own country where this is the case. For example, Trump. Trump refused to denounce the violent acts committed by the extremist right in Charlottesville, Virginia, because technically he's a Republican, so he doesn't want to denounce people within his group. And then we have the other side of that, which is Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler, who refuses to denounce the violent acts committed by Antifa in the Pacific Northwest. And it really just comes down to this idea that people won't call out their own or if they're within their group, even if what they're doing is wrong. And I move from that to what my next slide, which asks, what's the solution? And the solution is you got to clean house. The Buddhist position of nonviolence really should be the standard. If any given institution as a whole is having a problem with its extremist fringe revolving around acts of violence, they need to condemn and disown those individuals that practice such acts. This is applicable across the board, and that doesn't matter who you are. Whether you're on the right or left of politics, or as far as religion, it could be Islam, Buddhist, Catholicism, whatever. And then I do my last slide is just my sources and links to the information that I used. All right.